here at DMC, this is a lot of what we do, is coming alongside our partners and helping to understand the climate and the culture of an environment, what that looks like. And a lot of times that is just having very honest conversations and allowing those honest conversations to happen. Going back to kind of administrators and principals, is that important? Is that something that is a priority in your school, is actually having those conversations? What do teachers feel like on Sunday night when they're getting ready to come on Monday morning? Is that something that they're looking forward to? Is that something that, because that's ultimately going to change the culture of the school. Hello, welcome to the Learning Success Podcast, brought to you by Deo Mwano Consultancy. We're here to support you as teachers by providing practical insight in order to help you to build a healthy learning environment. Today, we're going to be talking about teacher recruitment and retention. My name is David, and I've been a teacher for over 10 years. I've taught in a lot of different environments, public school, private school, online school, and even at the college level. And recently, I was renewing my license, as many of you might be doing as well this time of year. And it got me thinking about teacher retention and also recruiting new teachers and the state of teacher recruitment and retention in New Hampshire. In this podcast, I want to explore a little bit about a report that was submitted in November of 2023 by a joint legislative study committee. And that report talked about issues relative to the teacher shortage here in New Hampshire and how to increase incentives in recruitment to solve the shortage. Now, the report itself is pretty extensive. There was over, I think, 17 main findings. So we're not going to have time to go through all of them, of course. But I want to touch on four main topics that I thought were really important. And the first of that is actually addressing the teacher shortage. The second one is recruiting new teachers and what that looks like in the state. The third is culture and climate of schools and how that affects recruitment and retention. And then finally, compensation. So let's dive in. The first thing that this report did was just acknowledge that there is, in fact, a teacher shortage in New Hampshire. The report says the teacher shortage is real, and it's motivated by several factors. Top concerns are stress and burnout, student behavior and discipline, school culture, and low salaries. I think that why this is important is just realizing, we all know that the world, especially of education, changed dramatically with the pandemic. And since then, that world of a school and people's lives in general, obviously, looks very, very different. And I think this is really important for the state to acknowledge that there is a teacher shortage, that people becoming educators is not automatic. People staying educators is not automatic. Here's a quote from Megan Tuttle, who's the president of the NEA New Hampshire. Megan said, "Every day I hear from teachers across the state who are burnt out and feeling undervalued and underappreciated. It's encouraging to see lawmakers across the political spectrum agree that there is a educator shortage crisis in New Hampshire and that the state has a responsibility to help address it." And I think, I don't want to focus on the negativity here of like, oh, teachers are underappreciated. I don't think that, that is the state. My colleagues, my friends as educators, I don't think that we're feeling like, oh, this is terrible. I just think that it's important to recognize this as an issue. And so I think, not focusing on the negativity, but just focusing on the realistic problem that New Hampshire is facing. And I think that that's important to move past that there is a teacher shortage. There is a smaller amount of new teachers coming into the system, and that's going to have an effect on the educational system, which will have an effect on students, which will have an effect on the workforce, and all of those things. And so I think that this is a really important first step. So just acknowledging that this is real, this is here, and it's something that I think as educators in schools we've seen, especially over the last 5 years, let's say, increased class sizes, teachers not coming back, teachers leaving the profession. And so I think, it's encouraging for me as a teacher, just as Megan said, that this is going to be addressed by lawmakers, that there is there is support coming, that this is going to be addressed. This is something that we need to think about and need to talk about, just like we're doing today. So that leads me into the second main finding that I wanted to talk about, which is new teachers. New teachers, of course, are incredibly important to the ecosystem of education. As I mentioned, which I'm sure I'll say several times during the podcast, the world is vastly different than it was just 5 years ago. With AI, with online platforms, so many things have changed. Students have changed. People are, the culture is different, and it's so important that new teachers from from that generation are actually kind of getting into that workforce, getting into education, so that they can speak to a new generation. Of course, teachers like myself who have been here a long time, and teachers that have been teachers longer than I have. Of course, that's an important piece of that ecosystem as well. That's really important, but that balance is very, very important, because the times are changing, because people are changing, and the world looks so different. It needs each other. Veteran teachers as well as new teachers is really, really important. So here's what the report found. I'll read from the report here. It said that New Hampshire's educator pipeline and enrollment in educator preparation programs is significantly decreasing over time. Something that we really need to think about. The number of individuals graduating with a degree in teaching from the university system of New Hampshire has gone down. The decline of educator preparation program students in higher education is a national issue, not just New Hampshire. Issues around the overall cost of a program, unpaid student internship requirements, and starting wages of graduates versus other professions are widely viewed as primary drivers of this decline. Now, the committee heard from a lot of different members of the public, and so they added this to this main finding here. It says the committee heard multiple issues that contribute to students not wanting to become teachers, including. So this is straight from people that they heard from. So I think this is really important. People cited personal safety and student discipline. Teachers do not come out of preparation institutions with the necessary de-escalation and safety care training to properly deal with troubling encountered situations. And it says, quote, new teachers are shocked by problems in the classroom. And then the second thing is a decrease in parental involvement and support. And I think this is really important because as educators and educator systems, someone who went through an education system here in New Hampshire, an educator program, I had great professors, great support. But I'll echo the people that spoke to the committee is that we talked a lot about materials, we talked a lot about methods, we talked a lot about curriculum. Right, we talked a lot about those things, and yes, classroom management, of course. But the issues facing some of our classrooms today, education programs really need to, and I think that this report is going to help that, to actually help students to help teachers, that is, to be ready for those issues. Because I think that those things aren't going away. We need to make sure that we are preparing teachers for what that looks like, and not acting like it's not there. Whether that be student discipline or whether that be personal safety. I mean, that is something that people are. That's a part of their real life as a teacher, and and that's something that we need to think about in terms of not only new teachers, but then also thinking about retention as well. What do those trainings look like? I'll be honest. The trainings that we have at the beginning of every year, the active shooter trainings, and I'm used to them. And, those can be really jarring. Are we actually, helping teachers, not just showing teachers what to do if we have a situation like that, but providing support and saying like, hey, this is heavy. This is not something that that you sign. I often thought about that, and probably said to many people, is like, that's not something I thought about when I signed up for teaching. I mean, I thought about, kids not wanting to do homework, or kids, someone with a bad attitude, or a parent that sends an email that that kind of is combative. Obviously, thought about all those things, but didn't think about some of these catastrophic things that people are concerned about. It's a real concern, and we need to think about that as we're talking to new teachers and being realistic about what that looks like. But providing support. There's so much support out there. There is so much support in our educational communities, and we know it's there. And just making sure that we talk about those things, because by just sweeping those things under the rug and just having a quick professional development hour, and then just saying, hey, let's just not talk about that anymore, is not helpful. People, new teachers are realizing that that's an issue. So I think that there's a lot that can be done in terms of recruitment for new teachers that can be also built into our schools. We can, because that's going to help with teacher retention as well. I think that those two go hand in hand. Yes, at the university level, that might be very, very important, but maybe we could bake some of those things into what we're actually doing in our schools. Think about yourself. Use this time to be kind of reflective at this point. Because we've got a few more points to make in the podcast. Maybe you start to think about, hey, what are some things that I can do differently? As a teacher, what does that look like? Not only in my classroom, but as the school at large, but especially, those administrators and superintendents who are listening right now, think about that. What does that actually look like? Have you been placing an importance on teacher retention? Is that something that you're thinking about? What does this feel like as a teacher at this school, at this district? And making sure that you are thinking of that level, not just providing the right amount of trainings, not just making sure that you're checking those boxes, but actually thinking about, here's new teachers who are looking to get into the system, and they are citing personal safety, student discipline as issues. They're not feeling like they are properly trained on those things, and I think that speaks to more of a personal level of just, not having the knowledge to be a teacher, but actually feeling safe and feeling supported and all those things. So, maybe, you as a building administrator can think about that and think about what that really looks like for your teachers. Have you asked? Have you asked the teachers in your building about these things? Take a look at this report. It's extensive, but it's not so long that you couldn't read it in one sitting. There's a lot to unpack. But take a look at those things, and this is what people are saying in the state. Because the only way that this is going to get better, because again, this is an issue. There is a teacher shortage, and the only way that this is going to be different is if we make sure that we make a commitment to changing that. And I think that starts by listening and hearing where people are at and actually understanding, what does this look like? I think that there's a lot of people who want to teach. I really do. I think that there's a lot of people who want to teach, who would be great teachers. And I think, though, that there are a lot of barriers that could be removed. And I think that this is one of them, in order to get people who are quality people into your school. And again, that makes an impact long term. Obviously, not only on the students, but the profession at large, as well as the state. There's a lot that can be done. I mean, that's the positive part of all of this. I think, I was talking at the beginning about, not focusing on the negativity. The positive part is that there is so much that can be done. Just imagine Imagine by removing some of those barriers and having somebody come in and being like, hey, here's what's going to happen. Here's the realistic part. When that happens, or if you feel unsupported, make sure you come. Here's how we address that. So that people who want to teach, want to be educators, and should be, because there are some amazing people in this state who would be amazing educators, and maybe wouldn't be because maybe this is one reason. They are now in your school making a difference, and pushing not only the profession forward, but pushing students forward. Well, I think all of these naturally kind of blend into one another, but let's move on to the third main finding that I wanted to go over, and that's culture and climate. Again, going back to the pandemic and the change that made, it was heartbreaking to teach during that time, that you saw that change. I think the hardest part for me as an educator was not necessarily the pandemic itself. I know that was a huge burden on parents, and as an educator, I think that that year the pandemic hit, we kicked it into high gear and made sure that we were offering support as much as we could. I think the hardest part for me as an educator was the following year, to see students come back and to see that the impact that had made on students and on their on their mental health, on the way that they accessed education, the way that they thought about education. That was the biggest piece. And I was always I was a math teacher. I'm still am, and for me, a big part of the learning environment is creating those experiences to make people think about, it's not just numbers and variables and things like that, but trying to get students to actually think about problem solving and to think about creativity and bring all those things in. And it was tough. It was tough to see students. Not only the pandemic, but of course, other political effect that teachers were facing, and sort of caught up in some of that. Let me read the statement here from the report. It says, "The climate and culture of our public schools has been impacted by the overall political climate of our state. Classroom teachers are feeling and reporting stress and concerns for consequences as a result of legislation proposed and passed in our state house. Teachers are leaving the profession, most often cite climate and culture as the biggest factor in their departure from education in New Hampshire altogether." I think that's significant too, because I think that there's a lot that's said about educators, and why there is a teacher shortage. And I think this line here, teachers leaving the profession often cite the climate and culture as the biggest factor in their departure from education in New Hampshire altogether. And I think that this is a tough one too, because it's so much. There's so much there of what that looks like, of climate and culture. I mean, how do you define that? What does that look like? It's really tough. But I think that by thinking about and placing this in the forefront, that those climate and culture issues in schools, in the building, what does it feel like when you're there? What I think that's the biggest thing is, like I said, I could feel, definitely in the last 5 years, you could feel something different in students and how they approach, and when I talk to parents as well. And I think that culture and climate is obviously so important. And that's that piece that can't be fixed by a spirit week. We can't just say, we have an ice cream party on Friday for students, and that's gonna change things. We need to make sure that we have resources for students. Obviously, the legislator is really important too, because of all those laws that we're bound by, and that system that we are trying to, we're taking all those laws and all those things, and actually we're meeting students where they're at and actually trying to navigate all of that. And I think that's not going to be. This is not something that is going to change overnight. In terms of culture and climate, but I think that it's also something that every little thing is very, very important. I think that those things are important. How we talk to one another, how teachers are feeling, and again, I think it starts with talking to teachers, and actually getting feedback. And that's going to be hard to hear. Things like, what does it feel like to teach at this school? The answer to that may not be something that is going to be easy to hear. And not to mention our teachers actually, teachers feel free to actually say what they're thinking, and are you providing spaces for that to happen? Here at DMC, this is a lot of what we do is coming alongside our partners and helping to understand the climate and the culture of an environment, what that looks like. And a lot of times that is just having very honest conversations and allowing those honest conversations to happen. But going back to kind of administrators and principals, is that important? Is that something that is a priority in your school, is actually having those conversations? What do teachers feel like on Sunday night when they're getting ready to come on Monday morning? Is that something that they're looking forward to? Is that something that, because that's ultimately going to change the culture of the school. And I think it also starts from the top down. Changing that culture will go from administrators to teachers, and students will feel that. Students will, when you create an environment and create an economy in a school where certain things are important and certain things are valued, that comes through, and the students will see that. I always say that teenagers, young people are some of the most attentive people that we have in our society, because that's the world that they live in. They take those cues from everyone. And so by creating that sort of environment and changing that culture, again, not by having an assembly, not by having some small little thing, a teacher tote bag is a nice thing to have, but those things don't change culture. What changes the culture and climate is actually supporting teachers, having honest conversations, and making sure that the values that you state in your school and in your district are actually valued, and people know how to act those out. Well, I feel like we could talk about culture and climate for a whole podcast, but let's move on to the fourth one and final main finding that the report went over, and that's compensation. And I think that this is a big one for a couple different reasons. It is an issue. Compensation is an issue in education, but I think it's often understood as well. Let me read first I just want to read from the report, just to kind of give some context. And I also have a quote from the National Teacher of the Year for this current year. And I think that it's some interesting insight. Let me start with the report. So this is from the report from the committee. It said, through testimony, the committee heard that the student teaching experience is a costly financial expense for teacher candidates. Although the student teacher is often required to obtain housing off campus for the semester, the student's semester tuition bill remains the same as those remaining on campus and who have access to and utilize campus amenities and services. Some students must quit their jobs and go unpaid and incur debt for the opportunity to teach. There are issues with folks not being able to get paid while receiving. There are issues with folks not being able to get paid while receiving college credit. So I think this says there's more here, but just to set the stage, and I think that again this is important. It says some students must quit their jobs and go unpaid and incur debt for the opportunity to teach. There are educators who want this opportunity, who are saying, yes, this is what I want to do. I'm in a program, I'm getting an internship, and compared to especially in I guess I can speak to the math and sciences portion, especially to the math and sciences where internships are paid, very competitive, and some of them are compensated very, very well. Educators who are required to have the same level of knowledge are not only are not having paid internships, which are required, and yet they are possibly having to quit their jobs in order to do that, or even incur debt. Actually, have to pay in order to do this. This is an issue from the get-go of teacher recruitment. You talk about a barrier for someone who actually even wants the opportunity. And then here, of course, is the teacher retention piece. This is the starting salary of a new teacher in New Hampshire is $40,478, much less than $56,727 per year, the average cost of living in the state. That's a big gap. $16,000 is a lot of money, and I think that the report here says it well, which is that the starting salary is around $40,000, and the cost of living is not that. It is much higher at $56,000. So this compensation piece is not talking about teachers who are saying, I don't get paid enough. I'm worth more than this. Really, what the committee is hearing from folks is we just want to make sure that we have enough to live. That this is not a viable profession for me to enter because I just won't literally make enough money in the state of New Hampshire. This is a quote from Missy Testerman. Missy is the National Teacher of the Year for 2024, and Missy was on CBS Mornings recently, and Missy said this, and I think that this is a great quote here, and it speaks to a lot of what we've talked about in this podcast. Missy said this: a lot of times you hear that there is a teacher shortage. We have a lot of trained teachers out there, people who were even in our classrooms, who were highly effective educators, but they left because they needed to make more money for their families. She said the average new college grad coming out of an educator program makes 25% less than most other career fields. I think that obviously, this is an important piece, obviously, because you can make all the culture and change and climate changes that you want, and you can have all the educator preparation programs that you want, but if people are literally not able to make ends meet by having this profession, then there is no way that any of this is going to meet up. And so, we really need to address that in New Hampshire, of thinking about what does this actually look like, especially for perhaps folks that have been in the system for 10, 20 years, have locked in on contracts, or there might be a lot of different situations that folks have, but especially people entering the workforce, especially for young educators. Are we essentially just not making it viable for them to be educators? Not to mention the report, it didn't really talk about it. I encourage you to read the report for yourself. Not only to talk about communities that are more rural in New Hampshire and how that affects those communities. This has a profound effect on those other communities in New Hampshire. Many communities in New Hampshire, and many students in New Hampshire who need that support, and districts who desperately need teachers and good teachers. Well, just to kind of sum up, I guess, there's a lot here, and we're not gonna solve this in one podcast. Nor is that the point. I mean, this is just the start of a conversation. But I think that we want to make sure that it's not just a conversation. I think we want to make sure that that we actually have actionable items to what this looks like. Here's another quote going back to Megan Tuttle, from NEA New Hampshire. Megan said, "We know educators are underpaid, and we are encouraged by the recommendations released today." Megan speaking directly to this report. Released today to explore state options for building funding streams to help school districts ensure that we have a competitive compensation package that will help attract young professionals and retain high quality experienced educators. So here are the recommendations then, as we kind of start to come to a close here in the podcast. Here's some recommendations that that this committee recommended for the legislature and the state. So there are three here that I just wanted to highlight. So the first says that the legislature will continue targeted incentives to assist local school districts with teacher pay. However, the most recent budget increases state aid to local school districts by more than $169 million over 2 years. That's already. Targeted education aid to towns with greatest need, and increase per pupil state aid to education by more than 31% over the next decade. And here is their recommendation to districts. Districts should be encouraged to use this increase in state education assistance to attract and retain teachers in the classroom rather than on administrative costs. In your school, the absolute greatest asset you have is that teacher. They are the one who are going to be carrying out the values and mission of the school, but also in front of students, in front of parents. Make sure that you make that investment, and make sure you have a way of actually, following up on that investment, right? You want to make sure that teachers are supported, that teachers are well compensated, that teachers feel safe, and then also make sure that they are held to a high standard. I think that, the educators that I know want that wholeheartedly. We want an environment where those values are targeted. The other two here that they recommend is invest in a robust teaching mentoring programs and opportunities for professional learning. Are you doing that at your school? Do you have teacher mentor programs? Is it just sort of just talk to this teacher? Are they informal? Or are they actually meaningful? And then the last one is consideration should be given to paid student, teacher, or internship experiences. What are you doing as a school to help support interns who are coming in? That may not just be a paycheck, but what other forms of compensation? What other ways are you compensating them or supporting student interns who are teaching in your classrooms, who are learning the profession, in all of those ways in your system? Well, it's been a great podcast talking about such an important and real topic in education in New Hampshire, and that is teacher shortage. And we also talked about new teacher initiatives. We talked about improving culture and climate in your school, and we also talked about competitive compensation. There's a lot to think about and a lot to discuss moving forward. We just wanted to thank you for being with us today. If you found something that in this podcast that was helpful, please share it with a colleague, and please subscribe to our channel. We look forward to seeing you next time.